I had always enjoyed late-night walks. There's something about the quiet of the streets, the gentle breeze, and the occasional rustle of leaves that soothes my mind. Last night, however, was different. It was the night I saw something that shook me to my core. As I strolled along the dimly lit street, my thoughts wandered aimlessly. The only sound was the faint hum of distant traffic. Suddenly, a streak of light caught my eye. At first, I thought it was a shooting star, and like a child, I made a wish. But as I watched, the light didn't fade away like a typical shooting star would. Instead, it grew brighter, illuminating the night sky with an eerie glow. Confusion mingled with excitement as I squinted up at the sky, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The object began to move, darting across the sky with rapid, impossible sharpness. It moved unlike anything I had ever seen before, defying the laws of physics with each erratic turn. A low rumbling sound filled the air, sending shivers down my spine. My heart raced as the object came to a sudden stop, hovering ominously in the night sky. It felt as though it was staring right at me, despite being countless miles away. Fear gripped me as I stood frozen to the spot, unable to tear my eyes away from the mysterious object. And then, with a speed that defied comprehension, it shot upwards, disappearing into the darkness. I stumbled backwards, my mind reeling with disbelief. What had I just witnessed? Was it some kind of elaborate hoax, or had I truly seen something otherworldly? I hurried home, the events of the night swirling through my mind like a whirlwind. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me like a suffocating blanket. As I reached the safety of my home, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. But deep down, I knew that what I had seen would haunt me for the rest of my days. And so, I did the only thing I could think of. I wrote this story, hoping that sharing my experience would bring some semblance of closure. The memory of that mysterious object, with its impossible movements and piercing gaze, will forever linger in the darkest corners of my mind. And who knows? Perhaps one day it will return, casting its eerie glow over the world once more. But until then, I can only wonder and wait, hoping that I never again encounter whatever it was that lurks beyond the stars. I jolted awake, my heart racing, sweat beading on my forehead. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of the street lamp outside, casting eerie shadows across the walls. I lay there, disoriented, trying to shake off the remnants of the nightmare that had gripped me. In the dream, I was lying in bed just like I was now. But then, without warning, I felt a strange sensation wash over me like a cold breeze creeping under my skin. Suddenly, I was no longer in my room. Instead, I found myself in a cold, sterile environment surrounded by blinding white light. Confusion and fear gripped me as I realized I was strapped to some sort of operating table. Panic surged through my veins as I struggled against the restraints, desperately trying to make sense of my surroundings. That's when I saw them. 3 figures looming over me, their features obscured by darkness. They were gray-skinned and slender, with large almond-shaped eyes that seemed to pierce through to my very soul. I tried to scream, to beg for mercy, but no sound escaped my lips. I was paralyzed, trapped in a nightmare of my own making, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. I was back in my bed, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. Relief flooded through me as I realized it had all been a terrible nightmare. I took deep breaths, trying to steady my racing heartbeat, and glanced around the room, reassuring myself that I was safe at home. But as I lay there trying to calm my frayed nerves, a cold chill crept down my spine. Something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something sinister lurked just beyond the edge of my perception. I forced myself to push aside my irrational fears and tried to focus on getting back to sleep. It took me longer than usual, but eventually exhaustion claimed me, pulling me back into the realm of dreams. When I woke up the next morning, the events of the previous night seemed like a distant memory, until I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. As I brushed my teeth, I noticed a strange mark behind my ear, a thin, red line that hadn't been there before. My blood ran cold as I realized what it was, a cut, small and barely noticeable, but undeniably real. Panic surged through me as the memories of the nightmare came flooding back, the events of the night before suddenly crystal clear in my mind. I stumbled back from the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest as I struggled to make sense of what had happened. Had it all been a nightmare? Or had it been all too real? I have been flying for over 2 decades, and in all my years as a pilot, I'd never experienced anything quite like what happened on that fateful night. The sky stretched out before me, a vast expanse of darkness speckled with shimmering stars. It was the kind of night that made you feel small and insignificant against the backdrop of the universe. I was cruising at a steady altitude, my small plane humming softly as it cut through the air. Everything seemed normal, just another routine flight under the blanket of night. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something strange. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, a glimmer of starlight bouncing off my windshield. But as I looked closer, I realized it was something else entirely. There, hovering in the distance, was a shape unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It was sleek and metallic, with strange lights blinking rhythmically along its surface. It didn't resemble any aircraft I knew of, and it certainly wasn't any kind of weather balloon or satellite. It was, for lack of a better word, otherworldly. My heart began to race as I watched the object, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I reached for my radio, intending to contact air traffic control and report the sighting, but before I could do anything, the object moved. It didn't fly away or dart off into the night sky like any normal aircraft would. Instead, it seemed to glide effortlessly, moving closer to my plane with an eerie grace. Panic surged through me as I realized just how close it was getting. I veered sharply to the side, trying to put some distance between myself and the unknown object, but it matched my movements effortlessly, staying right on my tail. I could feel my hands shaking as I struggled to maintain control of the plane. Fear clawed at my chest, threatening to overwhelm me. What was this thing? Where had it come from? And more importantly, what did it want with me? As the object drew closer, I could make out more details. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. The surface seemed to ripple and shift, as if it were alive, and strange symbols glowed softly along its edges. I tried to rationalize what I was seeing, to tell myself it was some kind of experimental aircraft or military drone, but deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. This was something beyond human comprehension, something that defied explanation. Suddenly, without warning, the object veered off to the side, disappearing into the night as quickly as it had appeared. I sat there in silence for a moment, my heart still pounding in my chest, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But there was no rational explanation. I had come face to face with something that defied all logic and reason, something that had shaken me to my very core. I eventually regained my composure enough to guide the plane back to solid ground, but the memory of that night has haunted me ever since. I've spent countless hours trying to make sense of what I saw, but the truth remains elusive. All I know is that we are not alone in this universe, and whatever else is out there, it's watching us from afar, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. So the next time you look up at the night sky, remember that you never know what might be looking back down at you.